there, and welcome back to me rambling on about how another one of my favourite Christmas films is being unfairly treated. And today's entrant into my hallowed list is a film adaptation of a classic Christmas story, 2004's The Polar Express, starring Tom Hanks as all the roles possible. The film tells the story of Hero Boy, yes, that is his name in the credits. Anyway, Hero Boy lives in the city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and is the latest kid of many to start to realize that Santa might be a whole bunch of bullshit, much to his parents' sadness. It's clear that the magic is coming to an end for him, and he's realizing the mythology of Christmas might just be that. Mythology. Lore. But not truth. And so, on Christmas Eve, sometime in the late 1950s, he lays awake in his bed, pondering this, hoping to hear the sound of Santa's sleigh, because in the end he does want to believe. But his skepticism's taken root, and he's lost hope. And this is when the Polar Express comes a-callin', arriving right outside his house in the street. But, despite there being a train in the middle of the road, only he can hear it. Only he can see it. And when he approaches, he meets the conductor, who invites him aboard for a round trip to the North Pole to meet Santa Claus. And despite his skepticism, he decides to go. On the trip there, he meets a number of different children, including Hero Girl, who's pretty much his sidekick for the film, the know-it-all kid, and Billy, another child from Grand Rapids who's in a much worse financial situation than him. A downtrodden boy who isolates himself from the rest of the passengers. On the train, they meet dancing waiters who bring them delicious hot chocolate. The boy braves the top of the train to get to the engine room alongside the Christmas ghost of the Polar Express. They chase caribou blocking the tracks, skate across a frozen lake, go along a rickety track on an absurd downhill incline, and eventually they arrive at the North Pole, where one of the children is going to get the first gift of Christmas. Of course, as these things go, the three main kids get separated from the group. And after a trip through Santa's workshop and the present distribution center, they eventually find themselves meeting Santa Claus, who chooses Hero Boy as the first gift of Christmas, giving him one of his sleigh bells upon request. The boy then goes home, dropping the bell, before he wakes up on Christmas Day to find it's been wrapped up and put under the tree for him, proving that Santa is real. And from then on, only those who truly believe can hear the sound of the bell. The end. And yeah, this movie, this is my jam. My nostalgia goggles are on in full force whenever I think about this film. Saw it with my dad when I was a kid, and I still make an effort to watch it every year if I can. Simply put, I love it. It always makes me smile, and it really makes me feel that Christmas spirit in full force. But that being said, I don't think the rest of the world seems to agree with me, much to my annoyance. From a financial point of view, I'd argue that it did quite poorly. To make this thing, they first filmed the actors doing motion capture, and then animated over the top of it. Sort of like Gollum for the Lord of the Rings, but not as good. And of course, this type of thing is going to cost a lot of money. Production costs coming into around $165 to $170 million, which was a lot for an animation at the time. And yet, the returns were not very good. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a box office bomb or anything like that, but it didn't do well either. It made around $314 million. And that's including milking this thing for everything it was worth with re-releases on IMAX. It was Warner Bros.' worst major film in years, and had a major drop-off after the initial surge, with the lowest opening 3 days for Warner Bros. In years. So yeah, it's pretty shit considering how expensive it was to make. And that's not even factoring in advertising costs and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, not great from a commercial perspective by any means. And then you come at it from a critical perspective and it's almost as bad. It has a score of 56% on Rotten Tomatoes from a critical perspective based on 208 reviews, and an audience score of 63% based on over 100,000 reviews. So yeah, not doing too well there either. And yeah, it's this that's gotten in my head. I don't understand why these reviews are so low. It truly deserves better. I get it. It probably isn't as good as my nostalgia-clouded mind keeps telling me. But surely it can't be that bad, can it? Am I truly so out of touch? Honestly, I do get why this thing did poorly at the box office. It opened not even a week after The Incredibles came out. And The Incredibles is Pixar's first film following Finding Nemo, which really cemented them as a top-tier studio worth the big bucks. People are always going to go see that. Plus, the animation looked a lot better than this. Far less creepy, to put it bluntly. I'd argue that was probably the major reason the film was less than successful amongst audiences. Although, at least it did set box office records on IMAX. Records that wouldn't be broken until the release of Avatar 5 years later, and Avatar's just ridiculous. So, I guess that's something. But now, let's delve into the main reasons why people seem to dislike this film. The visuals and the story. Okay, and we'll start with the visuals. Yeah, I don't have much of a defense for this. It really does look god-awful at times, and even at the time of its release, it certainly was never going to be a visual masterpiece by any means. I mean, look at these faces. It really does straddle the line of uncanny valley, I get it, and thus I understand the visceral disgust that the uncanny valley can provoke in you, and that did certainly colour a lot of people's perspectives. I mean, check out this elf. That face comes straight out of my nightmares. But I don't think you can really level that criticism at all the characters, and I do think a lot of them are actually quite well animated, or at least decently animated. I always thought Santa looked pretty awesome in the film. It's just there's a few notable examples of characters, particularly the children and elves, being horrifyingly and frighteningly ugly. But that doesn't mean all the visuals are terrible, like I said. Some of the characters do look half decent, and the world itself, the environment, the train, the snow, the steam from the train, the ice frozen on the tracks and the frozen lake, the North Pole itself, even the Northern Lights, all of these looked pretty great in my opinion. So whilst I can understand the critique, it certainly isn't enough for me to throw out the whole film. And another key critique I've seen thrown around a lot is that the film's boring. It's overly long and not much happens. It's clearly padded out for time. And I gotta argue, nah, that's bullshit. The premise of the story, being a train trip to the North Pole for a kid to believe in Santa again, I get it, it does sound boring in basic terms. And the film runs for an hour and 40 minutes. So there is time for the film to become bloated and for not much to happen. But I don't think that's completely the case here. We do start off a little bit slow in the house, but you kind of need that early stuff. It sets the scene, shows him as a doubter. The Christmas magic is dying for him. He then gets on the train, we have a little bit of character building, we meet our side characters, get a song to hype us up, before we get a little bit more dramatic stuff. Hero girl's ticket gets lost. Hero boy braves the top of the train to try and give it back. He meets the ghost. He skis across the roof of the train in a high-stakes life or death ordeal. There's a truly epic scene where the train goes out of control on a crazy track and then on the frozen lake. And then they have another really heartfelt song. There just isn't really any fat on this thing for the first 40 minutes or so. It's a real tight, concise, and epic experience. But with that being said, I do think the film starts to drag a little bit once you get to the North Pole. Not all that much happens there, and it lasts for like half the film's runtime. There still is a lot of good stuff, but there is also minimal development. The majority of the time at the North Pole revolves around the character of Billy, who hardly features in the first act on the train. Whilst our hero boy, he sort of takes a back seat in that regard. Then there's a long sequence of chasing down a present, the hero being a massive doubter, and then meeting Santa, which lasts hardly any time at all, before it's back home for the cute conclusion. So realistically, they could have probably shaved off around 15 minutes from the North Pole sequence, and it would have been a lot more streamlined and enjoyable. And so yeah, it is what it is, and I will admit the latter half of the film is a whole lot weaker than the opening. But it's still good. It's not like it's terrible, that sequence in the North Pole. It's just longer than it should have been. And whilst that's a shame, I don't think it makes the film too boring or unwatchable. I mean, the film has so much heart, great performances, a beautiful message, a hauntingly beautiful soundtrack. Yeah, I mean, the script is janky at times and the character animation leans towards bizarre, but that doesn't mean the film's terrible, at least I don't think so. It's a true Christmas classic, and I think it deserves a bit more love. But yeah, that's the end of the video, and these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the Polar Express? Do you like it? Hate it? Bit of both maybe? Kill it with fire perhaps? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.